For 6 years, I sent my parents $2,000 every single month. That's $144,000 of my own money, wired without complaint, without a single missed payment, because I believed, genuinely believed, that my mother's arthritis and my father's failing knees meant they couldn't work anymore. I believed they needed it to survive. I was wrong. And I didn't find out how wrong until I was standing in a wedding dress, 60 seconds from walking down the aisle, when a stranger I had never met walked up to me and said 7 words that ended my marriage before it even started. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up, because you need to understand exactly how deep this went before I tell you what happened on that altar and what I did about it afterward. My name is Claire. I'm 31 years old, and for most of my adult life, I was what people call the responsible one. My younger brother, Dylan, was the golden child, charming, funny, always had some big idea that was about to take off. I was the one who got the scholarship, worked 2 jobs through college, and landed a product manager role at a tech company by 26. By 28, I was making 6 figures. By 30, I'd bought my own condo outright, no mortgage. My parents, Linda and Robert, raised us in a small town in Ohio. Dad worked in a factory for 22 years until it closed. Mom did part-time bookkeeping. They weren't rich, but growing up, we were fine. Comfortable. Not fancy, but never hungry. When I was 25, my dad called me crying. He said the factory pension had been mismanaged, that his 401k had barely anything in it, and that Mom's arthritis was getting so bad she couldn't sit at a desk for more than 20 minutes. He said the words that would define the next 6 years of my life. Claire, we just want to live comfortably. We're not asking for much. We just don't want to struggle. I didn't hesitate. I set up an automatic transfer. $2,000, first of every month, straight into their checking account. I told myself it was nothing, I was single, no kids, no debt. I told myself this was what good daughters did. What I didn't know was that while I was signing off on that transfer, my brother Dylan was quietly starting a boat rental business in Florida. And guess who funded his down payment on that first boat? Here's the thing about suspicion, it doesn't arrive all at once. It arrives in small, ignorable pieces, and you explain each one away because the alternative is too painful to sit with. The first crack came at Thanksgiving, 2 years into the payments. My mother mentioned, almost offhand, that Dylan had just bought a new truck. A brand new F-150, fully loaded. I remember blinking and asking how he'd managed that, since last I heard he'd been between jobs for months. My mother laughed it off. Oh, you know Dylan. He always lands on his feet. I let it go. I told myself I was being petty, that begrudging my own brother a truck made me a bad person. The second crack came the following year. I flew home for Christmas and noticed the kitchen had been completely redone, new granite countertops, a farmhouse sink, custom cabinetry. When I asked how they'd afforded it, my father said, a little too quickly, your mother's cousin helped us out. I didn't push. I was tired from the flight, and it was Christmas, and I didn't want to be the daughter who interrogated her parents about kitchen counters. The third crack was the one I couldn't explain away, but I tried anyway. I was going through old family photos on my mother's Facebook. She never remembered her privacy settings, and I found pictures from a trip to Cancun. Dylan, his girlfriend at the time, and my parents, all smiling on a beach, dated 8 months earlier. I hadn't been invited. I hadn't even been told it happened. I called my mother that night and asked, carefully, gently, whether things were financially okay, because I wanted to make sure my help was actually going where it needed to go. She got defensive almost instantly. Are you saying you regret helping your own parents, Claire? After everything we did for you. That line, after everything we did for you, became a weapon she'd use on me for years, and it worked every time. I backed off. I kept sending the money. I told myself family doesn't keep score. I should have kept score. I met Marcus at 29 at a friend's rooftop birthday party in Chicago. He was a structural engineer, quiet in the way that made you lean in to hear him, and he had this habit of remembering small details about people, what coffee order you liked, what your dog's name was, the name of your childhood cat who died a decade ago. He remembered everything about me, and slowly, I let him in. When Marcus proposed 2 years later on a hiking trail overlooking Lake Michigan, I called my parents before I even told my closest friends. I was crying, laughing, breathless. My mother cried too, or at least it sounded like she did. My father said he was proud of me. It was, for a moment, everything I'd wanted our relationship to be. I asked them, during that call, if they'd be able to contribute anything toward the wedding, not because I needed the money, Marcus and I were paying for most of it ourselves, but because I wanted them to feel like part of it. My mother sighed and said money was tight, that between doctor's visits and the cost of living, they simply didn't have room to give anything. I said I understood completely. I told them not to worry about it, that having them there was enough. I didn't know that 3 weeks before that phone call, my father had wired Dylan $11,000 to help him open a second boat rental location in Destin. I found that out much, much later. From someone else's mouth. On my wedding day. The wedding was in early June at a lakeside venue outside of Traverse City, Michigan. 200 guests, string lights across the lawn, the kind of golden hour lighting wedding photographers dream about. My dress had a long train that took 2 bridesmaids to manage. I remember standing in the bridal suite, my hands shaking slightly, my mother fussing with my veil, telling me how beautiful I looked, how proud she was. I believed her. God help me, I believed her completely. 20 minutes before the ceremony, my wedding planner came to get me for final photos. As I stepped out into the hallway of the venue's guest lodge, a woman I didn't recognize was standing near the door, mid-50s, sharp green dress, the kind of woman who looks like she's spent her whole life being underestimated and hating it. She looked at me, and something in her face wasn't warm. It wasn't cruel either. It was pity. "You're Claire," she said. Not a question. I said yes, confused, glancing at my planner, wondering if she was a guest who'd wandered off from the main lawn. "I'm Denise. Robert's cousin," she said. "I don't think we've ever met, but I used to be close with your parents before. Well, before some things happened. I didn't have time for this. I had 20 minutes and a photographer waiting." I started to politely excuse myself when she said the 7 words that changed everything. "Does Dylan know you're paying for this too?" I stopped. "Paying for what?" She looked genuinely surprised that I didn't know. And then, in the rushed, apologetic way people talk when they realize they've said something they shouldn't have but can't take it back, she told me. She told me that for the last 4 years, my parents had been forwarding a significant portion of the money I sent them directly to Dylan, not occasionally, not as a one-time gift, but as a steady, ongoing subsidy for his boat rental business, which had been failing behind the scenes almost the entire time. The Cancun trip. The truck. The kitchen. All of it, funded in part by money I'd wired believing my mother could barely sit upright at a desk. And here was the part that made my stomach drop through the floor. Denise said my parents had told Dylan, and told other family members, that the wedding itself, the venue, my dress, the catering was being partially financed by them, using Claire's money, as a kind of poetic justice, because apparently my father felt I'd always been too proud to accept help gracefully, and this was their way of finally being able to give something back using funds I didn't even know they'd skimmed. They were about to walk me down the aisle in 12 minutes, having spent years quietly redirecting my support to my brother, lying to my face about financial hardship, and were now, apparently, planning to stand up during the reception toasts and take partial credit for a wedding I paid for myself. I want to be honest with you about what I felt in that hallway, because it wasn't what you'd expect. It wasn't rage, not at first. It was a strange, cold clarity. Like a fog I'd been walking through for 6 years had suddenly lifted, and I could finally see the shape of the room I was standing in. I thought about every excuse I'd made. Every time my mother deflected a question about money. Every time I'd told myself family doesn't keep score. I thought about the $11,000 to Dylan 3 weeks after they told me they had nothing to spare for my wedding. I had 2 choices. I could bury it, walk down that aisle, smile through my reception, and deal with the fallout privately, weeks later, the way a good daughter is supposed to. Or I could do something else. I chose something else. I asked my planner to give me 5 minutes alone. I texted Marcus, not my mother, not my father, and told him everything Denise had just told me, in 4 rushed sentences. Marcus, to his enormous credit, texted back almost instantly, "Whatever you want to do, I'm behind you. This is your day too. Don't let them steal it twice." That word, twice, hit me harder than anything else that day. I walked down the aisle. I want to be clear about that, because some people expect the dramatic version where I storm off in my dress. I didn't. I married Marcus. I meant every word of my vows, and I still do. That part of the day belonged to me and to him, and I refused to let my parents take it. But I changed one thing. Traditionally, my father was set to give a toast at the reception, something he'd been rehearsing for weeks, according to my mother, something he was so excited to share. When the DJ called for the parents' toast, my father stood, glass in hand, beaming at the room full of 200 people. I stood up too, before he could speak, and asked if I could say something first. I kept it calm. I want you to picture this, not a screaming match, not a scene from a soap opera, but a bride in a white dress, microphone in hand, speaking evenly to a silent room. I thanked everyone for coming. I thanked Marcus's family. And then I said this, I want to take a moment to talk about generosity, because I think it's the most important value in a family. For 6 years, I've sent my parents $2,000 a month because I believed they needed it to live comfortably. I recently learned that a significant amount of that money was redirected to support my brother's business, without my knowledge, while I was told my parents could barely afford groceries. I also recently learned that today, my wedding, funded entirely by my husband and me, was going to be presented to this room as something my parents helped pay for, using money that was, in fact, mine. I'm not saying this to embarrass anyone. I'm saying it because I think a marriage should start with honesty, and I didn't want to build my new family on the same silence I built my old one on. I sat down. My father's toast never happened. My mother left the reception in tears 20 minutes later, my father trailing behind her. Dylan didn't say a word to me the entire night. He left early too. I'm not going to pretend the months after my wedding were easy. My mother called me 11 times over the following 2 weeks. I answered twice. Both calls were the same, not an apology, but a demand that I understand context, that Dylan was struggling, that family helps family, that I'd humiliated them in front of everyone. I told her, calmly, both times, that I wasn't angry about helping Dylan. I would have helped Dylan myself, gladly, if they'd simply told me the truth. What I couldn't forgive was 6 years of being lied to, of being told I was needed while money was quietly funneled elsewhere, and being set up to unknowingly fund a lie at my own wedding. I canceled the automatic transfer that week. Not out of spite, I want to be clear about that, but because trust is the actual currency that made that transfer make sense in the first place, and it was gone. Denise, the woman in the green dress, reached out to me a month later. It turned out she'd had her own falling out with my parents years earlier over a similar pattern of borrowed money that was never repaid and never mentioned to the rest of the family. She told me she almost didn't say anything to me that day, worried about causing a scene, but that watching me get ready to walk into a marriage built on the same silence that had once cost her her own relationship with my parents was something she couldn't quietly let happen. I hired an accountant, a few weeks later, mostly out of curiosity and self-protection, and had them help me trace what I could of the money over those 6 years. It wasn't a perfect picture. My parents' finances were messy, and I never pursued anything legal, because at the end of the day, this was never about the money itself. It was about being told the truth. But what I found confirmed what Denise had said. Large, irregular withdrawals from my parents' account, timed within days of Dylan's business expansions, stretching back nearly 4 years. It's been 8 months since the wedding. Dylan and I talk occasionally, carefully, like two people rebuilding a bridge that was never really theirs to rebuild in the first place. It was our parents who burned it. He told me, in one honest conversation, that he hadn't known the full extent of where the money was coming from either, that he'd been told it was help from mom and dad's savings. I believe him mostly. He's making changes. His business is smaller now, more honest, and he's paying his own way. My relationship with my parents is quieter than it used to be. We speak on holidays. My mother has never apologized directly. She's apologized for how things came out, which isn't quite the same thing, and I've stopped waiting for the version of the apology I actually want. My father, in a rare moment of honesty over coffee a few months ago, told me he regretted not just the lying, but the fact that I'd spent 6 years believing they were struggling, when the truth was almost the opposite, and that watching me pay for it, quietly, dutifully, without ever asking for anything back, had made it easier for them to keep doing it. I think about that a lot. How my own reliability became the thing that was used against me. How being the responsible one, the one who never asked questions, made me the easiest one to lie to. Marcus and I are doing well. We just celebrated our first anniversary. I still think about that hallway sometimes, the green dress, the 7 words, the 20 minutes I had to decide who I wanted to be on the most important day of my life. I don't regret staying calm. I don't regret speaking up either. If there's one thing I'd want anyone listening to this to take away, it's this. Generosity without honesty isn't generosity, it's a debt someone else gets to define the terms of. I loved my parents enough to give them 6 years and $144,000. What I wasn't willing to give them was my wedding day, told as a story that wasn't true. They got the money. In the end, I got the truth. I think I got the better deal.